Welcome. It's time. It's time to drop in, open up, and receive. It's time to remember. It's time to believe. Let's elicit the beautiful, the good, and the true. It's time for me. It's time for you. Hello, beautiful community. It's your girl, Jillian Melissa, back at it again. It's officially summer. Huzzah! Huzzah! It's summer. Woo! You guys ate up that last episode. Wow. I want to thank those of you who personally reached out. I don't know if I come off as intimidating or what vibes you're getting, but a few of you were very nervous about reaching out to me. You're like, you said you love hearing from the community, but I wasn't sure when you email and DM. So let me just start by saying, I generally don't say things that I don't mean. So I mean it when I say I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear how these episodes are landing, what's stirring, what's activating. And I loved how from the previous episode, it's time to unmask psychopaths. And it very much is, both on the micro level in your life and the macro level on the world stage. Some of you reached out saying that episode really helped you clarify the person you've been dating, see them more clearly. Some of you who've been working a twin flame journey reached out, noticing psychopathic traits in your perceived twin flame. I also love that the term perceived twin flame, which I've been using for a long, long time now, and it's just something I coined because I was calling this man my twin flame, my twin flame, my twin flame. And then there were moments where I'm like, I don't know about this. Would my twin really show up like this and treat me this way? And so I started saying perceived because it was my perception that he was my twin, but I was open to being wrong. And now I see a lot of people on social media using that term. And that's how it goes. So I'm glad to see that proliferated. Some of you have been reaching out, wow, it sounds a lot like my perceived twin flame, and maybe he's more of a psychopath than I realized, and wanting support around that. And then some of you have also done inventory honoring, wow, I think I embody some of these psychopathic traits, and wanting support in purging that, cleansing that, purifying that, alchemizing that. I love hearing all of it. So please, please, please continue to share your feedback with me. I really do honor it. And I was just watching the Netflix show America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders show, which I obviously adore. And they were selecting their positions, the point of the triangle on the field, right? The person who's at the front is sort of a lone wolf in many ways. They're calling the shots, but they have no one to their periphery to see if they're doing the dance correctly with, and everyone that's behind them is just following them, but they're really sort of a lone island. And in moments doing something like this, where I'm just speaking my truth into a microphone in my own living room, it can feel like that point of the triangle. And I don't always get the feedback of those who are receiving it. It can feel a little bit like being in a vacuum. Even though I know you're receiving it, I know you're dancing along, there can be a loneliness at the top of the triangle. Not top as in superior. You get my point. So I love hearing from you. I love hearing how this lands. I can't stress that enough. So keep the feedback coming. I had planned on the next episode being a further exploration of those cluster B personality disorders. But given how intensely the last episode sort of punched some of you in the gut, I'm feeling like we need to ease up a little bit. And so more on borderline and narcissism and sociopathy will be coming soon. I do think there are a few nuggets I'd like to offer you now to help support all that is moving through your system and all that's being made conscious. The first thing, of course, listen to your body, get a snack, get your lip balm, get some water in you, whatever you need. The first thing we're going to dive into is really meant to help protect you. Some of you have taken space from a narcissist. I'm going to use the term narcissist right now, but you can assign any term that feels appropriate. Some of you have escaped a narcissist. When that character desperately wants you back, there is one thing that they need to make you believe, to put you back on that merry-go-round. As you know, narcissists tell a lot of lies, they manipulate constantly, and they understand that in order for them to come back and for them to be able to get you to feel like there's even something left in the relationship for you to return to, there is one major lie they need you to believe. These clowns need to make you think that they've changed. That's the lie. They have to get you to believe that lie, the lie that they've changed. Because that reactivates the hope that you lost when you went through that discard or when you finally released them from your life. You finally got to a point where you're like, okay, I've given you years and years of chances or whatever it's been, forget it, we're done. This clown's not going to change. And you embody that, they know the only way you will entertain them again is if you believe the lie that they've changed, that they're going to be better, that they're going to treat you more compassionately, that they're not going to cheat on you, whatever the pain points of your dynamic have been. You will know it's a lie because the change cannot be sustained. The change cannot be sustained. Maybe they'll put on a mask for a week, 2 weeks, but then they revert back to their true colors. Now, I'm not saying a narcissist can't change. And often there's sort of a boy who cried wolf phenomenon, right? If they keep saying they've changed, they change, I promise. And then you believe it and you take them back and then they hurt you again. And then this cycle goes on and on and on. And you keep getting duped. There's a chance that if they ever actually do the work and actually change, when you come back, when they come back, you might not believe that they've actually changed. That's a whole other story. But that's not where these creatures are at right now. For most of you, these men are testing you, and you will know it's a lie because the change will have no staying power. It will not have sustainability. It will not last. True change will have sustainability because it will be rooted in something spiritual, in something genuine. And so I want you guys to be cognizant of these narcissists who want to come back and get you addicted to that hopium. Yes, that hopium. The hope that's like a drug. The hope that things will get better. And this applies to all type of narcissistic relationships, not just romantic ones. Often they'll come back saying they're sorry. And I just recorded a transmission for my beautiful Patreon community a couple days ago about this. There's a strong difference between what I'm going to call regret and remorse. Regret, they come back regretful. They feel bad because their life is worse without you in it. If you set that strong boundary or they discarded you, let's just say you've been in a separation for 3 months. For you, it's the end. For them, they never really think you're going to actually walk away. So any break, any period of no contact for these narcissists, they always think it's just a break. They're just going to, swim in the pond, get to play with some other women, and then come back. And you'll be right there waiting. They'll show up in regret and they'll express that they feel bad because often they're facing karmic retribution. consequences for their actions. They're missing your light. They didn't realize you were really grade A supply, and they just actually can't seem to find such an easy replacement for you, even though they thought maybe they'd be able to. So they show up regretful for their actions because their actions had consequences that they don't like, and they are suffering because of it. I made a distinction between that and what I'm calling remorse. Remorse being that they would actually feel bad for how they hurt you. They're not just saying sorry to try to get you back as a ploy or to resolve their own guilt, but they actually feel deeply devastated by the damage they caused. They feel bad for you. Now, again, if you're dealing with a true narcissist, you're not going to get this because they are incapable of empathy. They can't actually care about your feelings. They don't care about your feelings. And if you're highly intuitive, when you hear somebody saying, I'm sorry for this, I'm sorry for this, you will be able to feel energetically if they're sorry at all, or if it's just performative, if they're just saying it because they think they should. And then if they actually are sorry, which they very well might be, they might only be sorry from that selfish, regretful lens. They're sorry that they lost access to you. They're sorry that they acted out so absurdly that you had to cut them off. They're sorry that their life is worse now that you're gone. They're sorry their life is crumbling. But are they sorry that you now have panic attacks, or that you are crying yourself to sleep, or what it's done to your identity or your self-esteem, or any of the consequences that you faced? Probably not if they're a true narcissist, and you will be able to feel that out. I invite you to trust your intuition on that. Remember, the devil is a liar, and you cannot change or manage a demon. So I wanted to offer that to a few of you who might be attempting to continue to make it work with these narcissists. You can only actually make a relationship work, a functional interpersonal relationship work with someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder, like a true narcissist, if they are doing the work. And very few of them choose to actually embark on the work. And hopefully later in this episode, I'll start to dive into what that work entails, because I think that will be productive for all who are listening. I also, I watch a lot of dance shows because I love dancing, and Spirit has asked me not to dance in this season, so I'm sort of vicariously living through all these dancers on TV. So watching this show, Dance Academy, phenomenal. Season 1, episode 15, the protagonist describes going on point. You know, ballerinas wearing point shoes where you're standing on your tippy toes. And she says, no one prepared me for how much it was going to hurt being on point. And then one day, you just get used to it. That line really struck a chord with me. I remember, I believe I was in 5th grade when I was first put on point. I had the tiniest little feet. And I spent all this time preparing my feet with these particular Band-Aids or wrapped lamb's wool, and you buy the best little inserts, and you do all these things to cushion your feet. And I remember that very first time I went on point, I was shocked at how much it hurt. I was shocked. Maybe it was 6th grade. I think it was 5th grade. It was so painful. And then, you know, by the time I was in high school doing Nutcracker on point, I would only hurt if I had an issue like, oh, my pinky toe has a blister, and so now that's hurting a little bit. But I didn't really feel it anymore. And it's incredible what we can get used to. I think for some of us who have been abused or have been used to a life of pain, it can actually be quite challenging to spot dynamics that are so painful. So if anything that I said in the previous episode resonated with you, please get support from an actual human, not a ChatGPT therapist, an actual human being. My mentor told me he believed it took 10% of the time to rewire and heal. So however long you were narcissistically manipulated and abused, it'll take about 10% of that time to heal. And I have found that to be a relatively accurate projection. While we're on the topic of men who hate themselves, we'll only stay here for a little bit longer. I did want to speak to a couple other things that might show up, especially if you're someone who used to identify or does still identify as an anxiously attached person. When you're anxiously attached, as we've talked about before and we'll talk about again, you often attract the other side of the coin, the avoidant. If you lean into lessons so hard that eventually you lean in, and then there's that nail in the coffin moment, and you learn in the most extreme ways like I do, you probably, if you were on the anxious spectrum like me, which I know a lot of you are, you probably attracted an avoidant who really hates himself. And again, this is not something that our culture talks about often. How do you deal with men who hate themselves, women? And so I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about it because I think this type of education can save lives. Men who hate themselves. Oh, men who hate themselves. Okay, so first off, men who hate themselves will romanticize a life that they don't currently have. They will always be doing that. They will always be romanticizing a life that they don't currently have. The grass will always be greener on the other side. And this often shows up in their romancing the one that got away or the ex or the side chick. And this is because reality requires accountability. So instead of being accountable to his own reality, he will romanticize either the perfect single life where he gets to sleep with a new woman every week and he has no responsibilities and no arguments and just his freedom. And if it's not that, maybe he romanticizes the perfect woman. Maybe she's a freak in the sheets, or she's a mattress actress, whatever he wants. She's the therapist to his ego. She's the wife who never complains. She cleans up after him, but maybe she pays her own bills. She never asks for anything in return, but she still treats him like a god. And if it's not that, maybe it's the side chick. And he convinces himself that he would be happier with her, and the only person that stands in the way of that is you. There are so many ways this can shake out. I could probably come up with 20 more examples, but the truth of the matter is, it's never about the other women or the other life. It's about the escape. Avoidantly attached people, and particularly men who hate themselves, will cycle through these types of fantasies to avoid facing themselves and confronting the real issue. They're unhappy because they have to be themselves. That's the real issue. They're unhappy because they hate themselves. And a man who hates himself will punish you for loving him. Let me say it louder. A man who hates himself will punish you for loving him. You think that by forgiving him over and over again, you are showing him what a ride or die you are. When really, he rides on his high horse while you die from the consequences. And let me remind you, girly pops, that's enabling. That's enabling. Avoidantly attached men or men who hate themselves, and I'm not saying all avoidantly attached men hate themselves, am I? Who knows? They don't change for a relationship. Because in his mind, if you're still there, if you're still showing up, and I hear so many of you, and I was the same, I kept going back and forgiving, they assume that, okay, well, what I'm doing can't possibly be that bad, because if it was, she would leave. If I was really that awful to her, she wouldn't stick around. So avoidantly attached people don't change for a relationship. They change from circumstances and consequences. And when you prevent them from feeling the consequences to their own actions, you're actually enabling your own abuse. You're enabling abuse. I also want you to remember that with these high-level narcissists, by sticking around and continuing to forgive them and going back and making up after every single fight, you're actually just making them better at deception. You're making them better at lying, better at manipulating, especially if you're highly intuitive, like I know you are. They sense that you're catching on, so they have to work even harder to maintain a mask. They have to work even harder to deceive you, which means that you're making him a more highly skilled abuser. He will be an even worse terrorist to the next girl. And there's always the next girl. And that's the hard thing. It's really a hard thing I've been reckoning with. When you liberate yourself, when I have liberated myself from these types of dynamics, it feels as though I'm sacrificing another woman in order to save myself. Because I know that now that I am really done with this person, he's going to find a new Jillian. He's going to find a new me eventually. He's going to have somebody else to do this to, unless he chooses a healing route. And so, yeah, it's really hard. When you really cut one of these birds free, they're going to find a new supply. They need it. They can't go on without it. And so that's a piece that I've really had to come to terms with on my self-forgiveness journey of, there's a part of me that I was like, at least if I'm taking the brunt of this, I know he can't be hurting other women too badly. And now it's like, all right, well, I don't know who's next, but somebody is. Another thing I want to emphasize about men who hate themselves, ladies, and I know I have a lot of male listeners, so I love you guys, and I hope this is not too triggering and or offensive, but I know the men who listen here love themselves, and I'm so happy that you do. But men who hate themselves, they will be confused by your love for them. They literally will not understand why you love them. And this was so bewildering for me to witness. They might actually grow to resent you for loving them. Or, and this was the case for me, they will so desperately want to prove their point that they are unlovable, that they will act out in ways that are so atrocious that eventually you will lose your love for them or you will grow to hate them. And that I think is the saddest thing about my dynamic with, this person I was entangled with. I loved him so deeply and I grew to hate him. I knew he hated himself to a degree, but I was naive and thought that my love could get him to love himself, that my love, along with the love of the Lord, of the love of God, the Holy Spirit of the divine, could vanquish any demons and return him to the purity of his essence and his soul. And so I thought my love was stronger than his darkness. But in fact, his darkness seemed to consume him and then me. And again, he tried to prove, look, I'm not lovable, and look, you hate me too. And so that's a very, very sad occurrence and not uncommon. All in all, a weak man will always be frustrated by a strong woman because her confidence exposes his insecurities and her standards will feel like pressure that he was never built to handle. So I just want to equip all my strong, compassionate, empathic, intuitive women with those nuggets. I hope that they serve you. And if there are any men listening who feel like they embody degrees of self-loathing, please, please, please take some action. You deserve to love yourself. You deserve to love yourself. Yes, one more thing I wanted to mention, and this was really flagged to me in the book Stop Walking on Eggshells by Paul T. Mason and Randy Krieger. I read this in high school and reread it many times in the last 5 years. This book focuses on the traits of borderline personality disorder. I highly recommend it. One really interesting facet of this disorder is that those who are lower functioning often act in and perform self-harm, while those who are higher functioning often act out in the form of criticism and rage. But the piece that I really wanted to flag is around emotional blackmail. I share this not to make excuses for abuse, not to make excuses for those who have taken advantage of your kindness, but perhaps to help you access more forgiveness in your own heart if you have been subjected to emotional blackmail from a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath. Again, I'm not saying make any concessions or lower your boundaries, or if you've decided to move on, I'm not saying to go back. None of that. I just want to offer a full picture. So emotional blackmail, essentially, if you don't behave the way I want you to, you will suffer. They will make threats, manipulate you. And the term emotional blackmail really implies some devious planned intent, some nefarious scheming, that this person is, sitting up late at night. Ooh, how could I make Jillian suffer? And while that may be true for some, and I don't doubt it, many of the people with borderline personality disorder, many of these narcissists who appear to be manipulative, are usually acting impulsively out of fear, loneliness, desperation, or hopelessness, not actually maliciousness. They are trying to elicit a response to help soothe their own discomfort, to help them feel better. They're like jimmy rigging your emotions to help them feel better. And they often have varying degrees of conscious awareness around their behavior that could be conceived of or construed as manipulative. But for them, it's about survival and identity preservation. It's not just that they get off on pushing buttons in people, buttons that they've installed. Although, sure, some of them do. I think we've given these birds enough airtime. The final thing I'll say, can you convince a narcissist of their narcissism? My old mentor, who I've referred to a lot, Justin Ritchie, used to say yes, but not by direct convincing, that it's a slow thawing process. A narcissist clearly needs a different orientation to the world, and the narcissists that are seeking therapeutic support generally get there because they've been forced to in some way. Some are facing legal consequences for physically assaulting a partner, and they've been put in an abuse counseling program, or some have just found their lives become so unmanageable, so disgraceful, that they know that there has to be another way. And so they can understand pretty quickly that they need a different orientation. But will they understand what that actually means, what that actually entails? Probably not for years. According to my old mentor, this is his perspective, a narcissist can see when introduced at a slow enough rate, at a titrated rate that doesn't induce cognitive dissonance. More often than not, when you're trying to just, you're such a narcissist, or that is not a rate, and that's also not an approach that's effective, but it's not a rate that their minds can handle. But something more akin to maybe the narcissist is talking to the therapist and says, I'm just so angry. And then the therapist asks, well, what do you feel in your body? And they say nothing. And then maybe, well, that doesn't sound like anger to me. And then you start trying to describe the emotions they're missing out on. It's like trying to describe sight to a blind person. It's a gradual awakening, but there are opportunities for noticing and changing. And so I've decided for the remainder of this episode to be incredibly raw and vulnerable with you guys about doing the work and what that entails, because I toggle back and forth, honestly, if I believe these narcissists can change or not, only because I am in my own personal healing process with a particular person, and I'm adopting beliefs at any given time that serve my healing process. I also want to make it known that I do believe with God all things are possible. I want to share a bit of an inside look about my healing journey to support those of you who are recovering from such a dynamic, for those of you who feel like, oh my gosh, maybe I am one of these backwards walking giraffes and I need help, and also anyone who's healing from anything. So not just about these cluster B personality disorders, but all the things that life can throw our way. For me, IFS, internal family systems, or parts work, was a helpful modality. Granted, I want to make the caveat that I think most traditional therapy has its limitations, and if you've read my bio or you know anything about me, you would know that. But I do believe that parts work is an important step for all of us. It's a step, though. It's not the only modality, but it's an important step. Self-Therapy by Jay Earley is a great book to check out if you're interested in trying to do parts work on your own. I don't recommend doing parts work on your own at all, but many people try. Parts work, essentially, you're naming different parts of your psyche, and it can very much make you feel like you're schizophrenic because you're personifying parts of the psyche. But I want to be clear, this is not fracturing your consciousness. It is not making you schizophrenic. And just because if I'm journaling, and I'm going to be very intimate with you guys and share my fullness, not everything about me in this one episode, but I do not recommend doing that in your personal life. I'm doing this now because I'm guided to. I trust in my divine protection. But if you give someone this type of roadmap to your psyche, they can absolutely use it to manipulate you. And I just would not advise that. But let's just say I'm journaling in the privacy of my own diary that I'm now sharing with all of you guys about this sort of inner bully I have. And I have named her Angelica for a lot of reasons, one of which, if any of you 90s babies grew up on the Rugrats, not the Rugrats, just Rugrats, like I did, you would know that Angelica was a mean baby. She was always bossing Tommy and Chucky and Phil and Lil around, and she always wanted those cookies, and she was selfish and mean and aggressive, and she lied. And so I decided to name that part of me, that inner perfectionist who's so violent and bullying, Angelica. Now this, when I'm writing from Angelica's perspective in a journal, I don't think she's a real person and I'm not a fragmented consciousness. I'm just attempting to bring something that used to reside solely in the unconscious, at the subconscious level, and rule my life. I'm trying to bring it into the light of awareness, into consciousness where it has less of a grip. And the more that I interact with it and dialogue with it and give it a proper voice while allowing my higher self to mediate a conversation, the more I can integrate that part and perhaps even alchemize that part. So maybe my inner critic becomes my inner cheerleader. As you do this type of parts work, your capacity for self-empathy often grows because you can really start to understand why these different versions of protection came into place in the very first place. right? I can empathize with the 3-year-old version of me who developed perfectionism as a defense mechanism to energetically abhorrent circumstances. I can have gratitude for that. As much as I came close to the edge in my own life, I survived. And my inner perfectionist had a hand in that. As much as that part of me might not be helping now, she got me here. You can hear my voice going. She really did help, that part of me. And there is also an interesting extrapolation that could be done if you take my Jewish lineage, right? There is this story in our cultural lineage that we're going to collectively, we have to be as significant as possible so we're not existentially wiped off the face of the earth. So that perfectionist neuroticism runs deep in Jewish culture. And my own personal experiences exacerbated that. And so when you can start to piece out a part of the psyche, like my inner perfectionist, I can start to really actually soften her over time. But it becomes a little bit of a trap because if you start dialoguing with these parts with the intention of getting rid of them, like I want to get rid of my inner perfectionist, that part of me that's such a bully, always making things harder for me, it's causing me to delay my projects, all of these things that are just so annoying. I just want to get rid of that part. If I try to dialogue from that place, I'm just going to cause that inner perfectionist, Angelica, to go back into the subconscious where not only does it affect my, internal dialogue and my thoughts and my emotions, but literally everything that shows up in my reality. We magnetize everything from that unconscious place. My mentor used to remind me, we don't fail at things we're consciously trying to do. We succeed at things we're unconsciously trying to do. So for a while when I was struggling to make friends or have a boyfriend who treated me right, it's like I'm failing at getting a nice boyfriend. I'm failing at making nice friends. And it was like, actually, I was succeeding at attracting relationships that allowed me to express emotions that I didn't fully express as a child, or to replay dynamics. Now, this work, part of why I think it's imperative to do with another person is because these protectors often don't want to be called out and also can be incredibly destabilizing. So it took me 2 full years I had 90-minute sessions every single week for 2 years with a very skilled practitioner before I could even touch or name the part of me that I will call my inner sick girl. I believe it was November of 2021 when she really became clear to me. And this is the part of me that gets sick. And now this might be touchy for some people. And let's take a moment, ask our bodies if there's anything we need before we drop into this further. So I asked my body what it needed. And at the time, which was several days ago, I needed a break from looking at a monitor. For those of you who also clock a lot of screen time, either staring at your phones or staring at a laptop, I highly encourage you to take time away from your monitors. But anyway, I went for a drive, which then led to receiving communication from my perceived twin flame and going down this whole healer rabbit hole, which was really interesting because one of the things I was about to talk about was the connection between this inner sick girl and my inner healer. However, given what has happened in this break, in this pause between when I was last recording and for you just seconds ago, I am actually going to dial back how much I share today because it turns out I'm a lot more susceptible to the complex and puzzling workings of my subconscious than I thought. That having had been said, I'm bringing up this types of parts work because I think it's a really imperative step in shadow work. The goal of this type of work, that again may make you feel like you're actually fragmenting your psyche when really all you're doing is clarifying what's been there all along. Goals of this type of work include strength, resilience, power, enhanced discipline, enhanced access to life force energy, less energy leakage, management of and interaction with all of these players. So the idea is not that I am eradicating my inner perfectionist or eradicating my inner sick girl or eradicating my inner clever one. And I'll touch briefly on these characters, perhaps. It's not that they're not there. It's that they're no longer hijacking my experience. They're no longer taking the metaphorical wheel. And they become a presence that is much more digestible and easier to interact with. And it's a conscious awareness. So now I want all of these players, these shadow protector parts that were all birthed, in fact, to help protect my inner child. I want them in the light of awareness. That way, they don't subconsciously create my reality. They don't do the thing they do and wind up hurting me without my conscious awareness. Another goal would be the ability to toggle between these players without judgment, with less self-criticism, with less self-loathing, and to embody more peace. So peace becomes your tuning fork. So when I mentioned earlier men that hate themselves, and this also applies to all humans that hate themselves, but I was really honing in on that particular dynamic for a reason, but anyone of any gender can hate themselves. Many humans actually do. And this type of integrative parts work can really help reduce that self-loathing. And again, when you're doing this type of work, when you're naming and personifying these parts of your psyche, when you're starting to ask them higher level questions like, how do you feel as you're doing your job? I once thought my inner perfectionist would be rejoicing when I asked her, how do you feel beating me up and telling me I need to die because I forgot a comma? I thought she'd be jumping over the moon, but in fact, she broke down in tears and was like, I hate doing this to you. I hate beating you up. You're such a sweet little girl. And so those types of higher level questions and higher level dialogues that are moderated by your higher self with your inner child present, with all of these characters, become routine. And we don't want to rush anything that we want to be permanent. So when we're building this relationship over time with these inner characters, we have to have patience and compassion for ourselves, and we don't want to push them away. We don't want to just go, oh, inner critic, I hate you, go away. Trust that they can be in the room, they can take up space, but not all the space. That's kind of what we're going for, to not have these parts hijack themselves. And how do you get a part to stop taking the wheel, to stop hijacking? Well, it starts by having an ongoing dialogue with that part, and that's part of this non-linear practice. So if I feel my inner perfectionist getting really activated, I might say to her, tell me what you have to say, not being antagonistic to her, but giving her a moment to, take the mic. In order to have her not take the wheel, I actually, for a period of time, have to listen to her more readily. When I'm doing the willful, like, Jillian, don't let your inner perfectionist take over, that's often me in my inner perfectionist mode as I'm literally saying that. And then by combating her, I'm inherently making her stronger. Talk about irony, Also, just another thing, a quick aside about perfectionism. Just want to remind fellow perfectionists out there, you don't have to figure it all out immediately. It would actually be very imperfect to try to perfect something sooner than it's ready to be perfected. That one's a tough one for me to get out. So I'm going to do that one more time because clearly I need it. Jillian, sweet Jillian, you don't have to figure it all out immediately. It would actually be very imperfect of you to try to perfect something sooner than it's ready to be perfected. And that also goes for your healing journey and for this very parts work that I'm talking about. This is something that has to happen over an extended period of time. And like I said, I was doing this work every week, and it wasn't until 2 years into it that I was able to access this new part. So that new part that emerged, the inner sick girl, I want to give her a little bit of voice. And then we're actually going to wrap up for today, because as I look at the time, I think this will be plenty to chew on. Okay, my inner sick girl. What does she do? She goes, I am in crisis and therefore I demand attention. My inner sick girl doesn't want me changing or getting better or growing stronger. Anytime I enact strength, she tries to put me down for the count or injure me or show me that I'm not ready to embody that level of strength, and she hits me with another calamity. This is sort of an offshoot of my inner victim. Often throughout my life, and there was a period of time I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which is such a nebulous disorder. But all I knew is I could barely function, and I'm doing physical therapy. Anytime I did a little bit of PT, then the next 2 days I wouldn't be able to walk. I'd be down for the count completely. And so every time I attempted to convince myself of my strength, I actually reaffirmed that unconscious inner sick girl. And this inner sick girl is a very strong and loud protector that was formulated when I was very young. And still, despite all the healing that I've done all these years later, still shows up in a lot of ways. For example, this may seem very silly, but she makes making gains in the gym, for example, very challenging. It didn't matter for a while how much creatine I was putting in my shakes or the protein amount. My trainers had me tracking my protein, and I'm doing private trainings 3 times in group classes and weight training, this and that. And it's like, my trainer, bless his heart, Jared, J-Rod, that's what we used to call him, told me I was the slowest progressor he's ever seen in functional patterns, FP, which I did for several years. I was like, thanks, man. I have a very, very strong fighter inside of me who's actually resisting this process. And because that part of me was in the subconscious, she does rule a lot of things going on with my body. Now, I want to make a couple things clear. Not every time I feel sick or have a symptom is it the inner sick girl. As a highly sensitive person moving through the world, a very dense world not made for highly sensitive people, and as someone who's empathic and someone who works as a psychic, if I have a super busy action-packed weekend or a family trip, and maybe I go to a wedding and I'm traveling and I'm on a plane, I'm in an airport, then from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., I'm doing breakfast, this activity, this with this person, when I'm used to more alone time, it's very normal for me to have a physical reaction on the other side of that trip. That's just part and parcel of my experience. And in yogic and Vedantic philosophy, there's this term koshas, meaning sheaths or layers. And they refer to the distinct layers of the human existence, which there's a physical, an energetic, a mental, intellectual aspect. And these koshas are often conceptualized as veils or layers, like an onion, that obscure the true self. And they're sort of nested inside of each other, like these concentric circles. The outermost layer is the Annamaya kosha, the physical sheath. And this outermost layer includes the tangible aspects of our being, the physical body, the physical sensations, our health, our response to external stimuli. So with my old mentor that I've mentioned a bunch, Justin, I used to get frustrated because I'd go back home to New Jersey, not go back, I would go back. I'm still working on not saying so much as I talk. I'd go back, I'd see my parents, I'd be in the homes that I grew up in, I'd see old friends, I'd have all these experiences, and then a week later, not a week later, exactly a week later, I would start having these cold symptoms or a sore throat or fatigue. And I would get really frustrated thinking it was my inner sick girl that I haven't gotten a grip on. And he reflected, I think in some of these cases, it's actually that you're doing healing on a deeper layer, an inner layer. And if you're doing, let's say, some mental healing at an inner layer, you have to go through that outermost layer, that Annamaya kosha. So there will, of course, be a physical expression of whatever it is you're healing at a cognitive or energetic level. So that helped me have a little bit more compassion for myself. And also, gave sort of the intellectual spirit in me something to chew on, starting to try to delineate, when am I quote unquote sick or having symptoms because this is the organic expression of my body moving through a healing process? And when is it this shadow protector, my inner sick girl, vying for attention, doing what she does, stopping me, thwarting my growth, seeking my attention, and craving intimacy with me? And for me, it became really important to try and differentiate when it was this shadow protector vying for attention and when it was this genuine somatic reaction based on the healing I just went through. And I've really been interacting a lot with my inner sick girl lately because I do believe the opposite side of this coin is the inner healer and savior, which is the character I've embodied the last 5 years professionally. I've been the past few weekends attending a virtual alumni call for the Sanctuary. So the Sanctuary is a healing facility I went to in 2018. It's changed since I went there. They do a lot more psychedelic ketamine-assisted therapy now. But when I was there, that's not what we were doing. But it was a really profound place of healing for me. And they actually have alumni calls every Saturday morning for those who've been there at any point in time to connect with a practitioner and just be in community. And I've been really enjoying reconnecting with that tribe and being on those calls. And interestingly, a lot of people who are fresh out of these facilities want to launch a healing career. And sometimes that's really divine and really aligned. And those who are meant to be healers are often those canaries in the coal mine. They're often those who've been through terrible hardship, often those who've had symptoms that the traditional system couldn't help, and they figure out their own pathway, and then they immediately want to go help and heal other people. And I had always thought it was the healed expression of this protector, but the more I interact, excuse me, this is tough. The more I interact with this part of me, now that I have a lot less calls that I'm doing, because I'm only seeing 5 regular clients and that's it, the more I'm starting to feel into how this sort of inner healer savior complex is maybe not just the healed expression of the inner sick girl. Maybe it's just an inversion. It's like 180 degrees as opposed to 90 degrees. Maybe the midpoint, the middle path is true. It's just me being, an independent woman living my life. But yeah, I was really struck by on the Sanctuary alumni call how many people were talking about wanting to be a healer, wanting to be a shaman, wanting to be this, wanting to be that. And then it was my turn to share. And I was like, I've actually been in this for 5 years and I'm hanging up my healing hat. And it was really fun to be in that community. But yeah, these parts can be tricky, which is why I think it's really helpful to work with somebody else because you will deceive yourself. For example, I have this inner clever one that I mentioned earlier. And Justin used to reflect it back to me like this. Are you a good witch or a bad witch? Yes. Like, it's just clever. It won't really answer. It'll avoid being pinned down. It'll say by any means necessary. It'll trick me, So maybe I feel like I really need to block this person. It's not good for them to be in my life. They keep contacting me. Every time they do, I get swept up in it. It's my highest good to block them. Maybe I really feel like I'm supposed to block them, but then the clever one starts spinning an argument like, well, you have only insecure people block other people because if you really have discipline, someone can message you 10 times, but you just won't respond and it won't bother you. And if you're really enlightened, it shouldn't matter. And like the clever one will spin all of these stories and be very clever and very manipulative. So anyway, we all have these different protectors. Some are very common, like an inner critic or an inner perfectionist. Look at me messing up as I try to say perfectionist. I love that for me. Some are very niche. I have some very niche characters. I really encourage you to start to consider maybe playing with these shadow protective parts. You as an adult, mature person in the process of doing this work have to tend to your inner child because we must remember that it's these unconscious protectors who wind up doing the job for us if we don't. And when these unconscious protectors that we're bringing into the light of awareness and making conscious, when we personify them and label them and track when they get vocal and track what they're saying and track their mechanism of action and track what triggers they attract and really start doing the work over an extended period of time of years and years and years, we can see these parts are doing the protecting in such a destructive way. And the higher self, the soul self, has to come forward and tend to the inner child so that these protectors don't have to do it. Anyway, this type of work is very cerebral. It's certainly not for everyone, but it is for a lot of people. And I certainly think it's for narcissists who have high degrees of cognitive empathy, but low degrees of affective empathy. Anyway, I think we're really at time. I'm sensing this is it for today. So thank you so much for tuning in. I know we bopped around. Hopefully it was nourishing and enlightening. I look forward to dropping in again very soon, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for tuning in to It's Time with Jillian Melissa. If you're feeling like it's time to leave that toxic relationship, launch that business, share your voice with the world, if you're feeling like it's time for whatever, it probably is. So I invite you to trust your intuitive compass. And if you're feeling like it's time to connect with me, I invite you to follow me on Instagram at JillianMelissa_intuition. That's really the hub of all my content, and using the link in bio, my link tree, you can access links to book a private session with me. You can join my monthly membership community through Patreon. I post upcoming workshops, group channeling classes, intuitive guidance gatherings, and much more. So that's really the best way to stay connected with my energy. My hope is that you bestow love on all those who cross your path. And until we meet again, I love you.